This is a conversation we have in our car a lot when we're driving around, when we're not recording. And I want to take this moment real quick. Make sure you're signing up for the newsletter. It's right down below. It's the only link down below. You're going to get a lot of offers there and be able to read things. It doesn't cost anything, but there's tons of offers that we have coming up that you're going to want to be on the newsletter for. This is something we talk about a lot, y'all. Where's the toughest place to play that Georgia plays? Now, we've all been around the block a little bit. Um, where would you say, Matt? I'll start with you because you've been to LSU. You've not been to Alabama, though. I don't think for a Georgia game. So, of the spots that Georgia plays, what would you say is the toughest?
The two toughest environments, I'd say, was 2018 LSU and 2017 at Auburn. That place was going nuts. Obviously, Georgia was number one going in there, and Auburn had their way with them. But I remember that atmosphere was crazy, and that was a better atmosphere than I've ever seen at Neyland Stadium. And a lot of that was because I covered Georgia, and Georgia's had no problem going to Neyland Stadium and winning those games. And I'm behind glass too. I feel like I have to say that the glass in the press box really takes away a lot of the noise that I'm sure Neyland Stadium has that I don't really get to feel as y'all do being down there shooting the game. So LSU was wild, and I totally understand why it's known as Death Valley, one of the best environments in college football, one of the loudest stadiums in college football. So that and urban hair can be pretty crazy as well. I've got to give them props. But as far as not covering a game, Clemson can get really, really loud. I was at a game over there at like 14 years old. Charlie Whitehurst and the Tigers took on Devin Hester, the Miami Hurricanes, 3 overtime game. That was one of the loudest places I've ever been in my life. Clemson lost that game, so that can get really loud. And I was in town for the 2013 game where Georgia lost to Clemson. I know, Dean, you covered that game, but I have to give that one props too. But Jordan Hare can get pretty crazy.
Ryan?
Yeah, I realized in this conversation, I don't know if I've been to a high stakes road game where they're playing a team that has a lot going on. I've been to Auburn, Tennessee, all that, but none of them were super high stakes. I thought Auburn got really loud. Tennessee was louder to me than Auburn in 21. The other ones are not, it's certainly not South Carolina or Vanderbilt or something like that, but Tennessee gets really loud. Yeah, you are behind the glass. I forgot that press box has glass.
It makes a big difference.
It's loud in there. It's loud. I don't remember Auburn getting crazy loud in 21. That was a 3:30, 2:30, I guess. Exactly.
Well, I'm just trying to remember.
Your face is exactly my point. I
don't
remember it.
When they started a little comeback there in the fourth.
Auburn?
Yeah, but Williams-Brice can get loud in the first quarter, and I'm sure a night game there is pretty loud as well. So it's in consideration for a little bit, but like Ryan said, at Missouri, I wasn't there last year. Y'all can tell me if that was loud when Georgia was down in the fourth quarter there, but Kentucky can get loud here and there. Vanderbilt isn't. Atlanta is basically another home game for Georgia normally. And then Jacksonville's 50-50. So there are only a few options, really, if you really think about it.
I think the most consistently difficult place they play at is either Auburn or Tennessee. And the loudest is Tennessee, and it's not really much of a comparison. But once you can't hear, you can't hear. So that's not a huge deal. So I would probably go in order of places they consistently play. Tennessee, Auburn, then South Carolina, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
We haven't talked about Kentucky at all.
So Kentucky, Arkansas, Clemson,
Mississippi State was not that loud.
No, Mississippi State, there's a lot of ambient noise because of the cowbells. But then the strange thing about that game, y'all? Matt, you were there, right? Yeah, we were all there. The odd part about that game is that during the play, it's very quiet because they can't do the cowbells at all, and I don't think they know how to cheer. That sounds crazy, but you have to understand what I'm saying. So much of their ethos is ringing the cowbells, and so they don't make a lot of noise any other way. Like, I guess you can ring a cowbell harder. Auburn makes, to me, the most bang for your buck is Auburn. LSU is probably right there with them. Now, LSU is not a place that they play consistently. LSU, so the places they play but don't play consistently, LSU, Alabama, State, Clemson, places like that where, they're only playing twice every 10 years or something. Well, once every 10 years in those schools' cases. LSU can be very difficult to play. It just can. Auburn is very difficult to play. Tennessee is very difficult. Kentucky, Arkansas, places that have, about 80,000 fans, you can tell they have about 80,000 fans. You can tell there's a difference between 90 and 80,000 in my view. You can tell a difference when they're at 100, like Alabama, Tennessee, and to some degree LSU. And I guess Athens. Is Athens loud to y'all?
Yeah, we're used to it though.
Right. Right.
And they've had big wins there recently, multiple top 10 wins.
What's the loudest? What's the loudest these last 2 years? Go ahead, Matt, and then straight to Ryan.
Tennessee and then Notre Dame in 19.
Well, these last 2 years.
2 years. Arkansas in 21, I thought got pretty loud. Georgia ran through them, and they were undefeated. I think 5-0 at the time. That was a big game, and it was a noon game too, I believe, and that was still pretty loud.
Yeah, that's the way I'd rank. I think Tennessee definitely was the loudest that place has ever been. Arkansas noon still is the most impressive. Or at least recently.
Recently, yeah.
Arkansas noon in 21. That still impresses me the most, just because they got up for it. But has any other game in the last couple of years been even close to those two?
In the last two, well, Kentucky at home in 21 was a very important game. I don't know that it was loud.
I think South Carolina, because it was a night game and it was the only, that one was loudish. It was a blowout.
I can't remember that.
Auburn game last year, it loud in moments, but it wasn't.
So the problem, y'all, is that it seems like Athens is not that loud, but it has a dramatic effect on the people who play there. And all those false starts for Notre Dame, all the false starts for I'm trying to remember Tennessee for sure in 2022.
Arkansas went backwards twice to start the game.
Arkansas. I mean, if you want to think that Georgia's not a tough place to play, I mean, okay, I'm not. In the 90s, I would say that that's true, and to some degree in the early 2000s. But once they started really winning, that crowd has become a huge weapon for Georgia. I think for a long time, and it still is a wine and cheese crowd for the most part, but the students are way better than they were when I was growing up. Georgia was not a super intimidating place to play. It is now. And I think that that's, I'm just thinking of the places. So South Carolina and Georgia Tech, Matt, people aren't seeing them really at their best right now. Like, Georgia hasn't played a competitive, full capacity game in Columbia since 2014. In 16, that was a Hurricane Sunday game, and it was South Carolina didn't hardly score. In 18, Georgia blew them out, right, real quick. In 20, COVID, blowout. 22, blowout. So that people talk about how tough Williams-Brice is. Okay, Tech, on the other hand, they're right on top of you, just like Carolina is. It's a smaller place. It can get plenty loud. When it's loud, it's loud. But I don't remember, and I'm trying to think, the other places, like, they've not played really anywhere else except Clemson. Have they played anywhere else on the road? Like, Arizona State wasn't really.
You have that. You have Colorado.
I wasn't there for that game. What was the other one?
Oklahoma State. Were you there for that one?
It wasn't loud to me. I mean, the loudest thing to me was them slapping the padding on the stadium. I thought that was Oklahoma State was ridiculous because of how crowded it was. Go ahead, Matt.
Notre Dame in 17 was loud all the time because it was almost 50-50.
You couldn't tell. I would argue that the loud thunder of noise in Jacksonville coming from one side to the other when it's absolutely quiet on one side, that is as shocking as anywhere. I mean, I remember a couple of moments. One was when there were three. One was in DJ threw an interception for a touchdown in 2005 at Tennessee. One was the miracle at Jordan Hare. That's maybe one of the loudest. And then when Alec Ogletree took back the touchdown off the blocked field goal against Alabama at the Dome, which I feel like is unfair because it's a dome. So, I mean, how loud was Indianapolis, y'all?
It had some pops.
I always felt like the loudest that it got was when the Kobe Dean took that scoop fumble back at the beginning of the game. People's voices weren't worn out yet. You know, they thought they started the game off like that. That's the loudest that stadium. I don't think people want to admit that, but I think it was louder than when Keeley was bringing it back.
What do you think, Matt?
I was behind glass. The excitement after the Keeley is what I'll remember the most, if you can hear me.
I know we
got shit.
It's just like you're behind glass right now. What about Ohio? Well, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to ask about Ole Miss because you've been there, right?
Yeah, it's like
it's not.
It's like any. I don't mean this disrespectfully to Kentucky, Arkansas, Clemson. Ole Miss is smaller than those places. I don't mean it disrespectfully to those places. They just don't compare to Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, and I guess Georgia, just because of volume of people. Ole Miss is a perfectly adequate place to go watch a football game. It's not an intimidating place to play at all, to me. I've seen Georgia there maybe 3 times. Not a lot. Arkansas at night can be, but it's the same thing as South Carolina at night. I mean, South Carolina's worse, I would argue. Clemson's worse than Arkansas. Like, you don't, but I think the toughest place is Tennessee because of the ambient noise. Auburn because of the rivalry and Auburn fans, they're into it. They're into it in a way I feel like a lot of other fan bases are not. Am I wrong there, Matt?
No, they're passionate. They can get loud, and there's a lot of noise that comes into that stadium too, but they get after it.
Yeah, they do it. The Auburn does a good job of freaking people out. I did want to ask just very quickly, where does the Ohio State missed field goal, where is that on the pantheon of noise? Or speaking of Clemson, or Christopher Smith, I don't remember the Bank of America being overly loud. I could be wrong there, though.
No,
I think the Rose
Bowl
was probably louder than. I mean, that when Lorenzo Carter blocked that and when Sony scored, I mean, half the stadium just erupted and it just cheers that they knew they were going to the championship. There was a different excitement noise, but that place was really loud, I thought.
Yeah, the Ohio State blocked field goal was probably the loudest moment that I can remember. It was one of those just kind of just so fast, just for 2 or 3 seconds. It's just so loud. Probably just as far as a moment, I think that's the loudest I can remember.
DeAndre Swift in 17, Matt, against Auburn.
That was not. That place was electric. And you thought they were going to win the game already, but that was the killer.
They put them up 28-7.
And yeah. I mean, everyone knew then the game was over, and you could cheer the whole run too. So it was a long cheer. It wasn't just one moment. When he took off, everyone knew he was going to score. So it was a super long kind of excitement, moment for everyone to have.